Alrighty, we're on. I'm here with Cassie To. Say hello, Cassie. Oh, sorry. I got you mid-drink. She's.
I got to not slurp into the mic. Sorry, I got to move. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. So, I think I would have met you probably 4 or 5 years ago, possibly. Maybe even longer, I don't know, because how long's Dex been at DT1 for?
He's been there longer than me, same as my boyfriend, so probably 8 years, but I've only been training for 6 years.
Okay, so it would have been,
4 or 5.
4 or 5
at
years.
An open mat, I reckon.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so I guess, all I really knew about you at that time, because we rolled a couple of times and, obviously Dex mentioned that you were interested in fighting, and I did hear something about the music at some point, but I can't really remember what was exactly said. But perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more on the music side of things. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I guess how would you describe yourself?
Mm-hmm. So I generally just describe myself as a composer, which I don't know why I always feel a bit like that sounds so like old school. And then I like to kind of preface it with like I do mainly write a lot of music for like TV. So I guess like TV, film, media composer is kind of how I would describe what I do.
Okay. All right. We'll get into that. Let's I'm going to pull it all the way back and let's talk about what would be your earliest memory?
Oh, I've actually thought about this before, and like you read stories and they're like, "Oh, my earliest memories," is, and I'm always like, "Fuck, I don't know what mine is." I think I can think of like, it's hard because when I think about this, I don't know if I know this is my actual earliest memory or I've seen photos and gone, oh, I kind of remember that moment in time. But a couple of things come to me is like, I have this bear that I've had since I was born.
Yep.
And I kind of remember walking around the house with it. And for some reason I think of like going into my parents' room with my bear, and it's like, it must be like mid-morning or something. But I just like, I always had this bear with me. So I took it everywhere. And then there's another thing that comes to my mind is me, and it's a photo, and it's me playing with my dad's congas. And I feel like I just remember that day because it was like around Christmas and nothing particular, but I think it was just fun because we were like mucking around on the congas, and I must have been maybe like 3, I think. And then the one with the bear, the one I just mentioned, I don't know about that one. I don't even know if I just made that up, but
it's hard, isn't it? Because it also blurs in, right? And then sometimes you'll get told stories about what you were like as a child, and then you can sort of see it and not. Like, I think the memory that I most vividly remember, and I always talk about this one because I'm pretty sure it would be one of my earliest memories, was my brother and I throwing rotten plums at each other when I was, I don't know, maybe 3 or something like that. Yeah. And then it was summer, so it was hot, and I was thirsty, so I put the hose in my mouth. And then my brother turned the hose on, and then it was a long hose, and then I obviously choked myself, and then ended up in the hospital.
Oh, Jesus!
But I don't remember the hospital or anything like that. But I can actually vividly remember having the hose in my mouth, and I don't know whether if that's the crystal clear version of the memory or like the sort of muddled version that I can sort of somewhat remember. But that's probably the things that always come to my mind. In terms of earliest memories. But where did you grow up?
So I've always lived here, so Willoughby. So my parents have had the same house for like over 30 years, and I was born in like Royal North Shore Hospital, and I've literally lived, which is down the road from where we are now, but my whole life I've just lived in the same house on the same street, which I always thought was quite like normal, but then talking to people, that's actually really unusual. People always like, you've lived in the same house your whole life, and I'm like, yeah. They're like, you've never moved, and I'm like, not like, so, which I quite like that house has a lot of memories. And it's just like my parents have had it. This was their first house together, so they just,
oh wow,
so for them I can imagine has even more sentimental value. For sure. So I think that we'll always just have that house in the family.
So I guess when how like we always associate smells with places, right? So a lot of times in your own home, you can't really smell it.
No.
But then if you're away for a bit and you come home after a holiday, then you sort of, get that smell again, right?
Yeah.
Is there any particular memory that comes to mind when you go home to your parents' place?
Like after a holiday kind of thing? Not a particular memory. I feel like there's more like a feeling. There is definitely a smell, and I couldn't explain it to you, but it'd be a mixture of like whatever they've been cooking plus the dogs.
Yep.
Plus whatever weird like fragrance my mum's bought for like some part of the house or some sort. But I don't know if I have a particular memory of coming home, but like cooking's a big thing. Yep. I think coming home and someone's in the kitchen cooking, usually my dad, but just there's always someone cooking, I think, in my house. So that's probably like the thing I think of at home is like coming home and cooking and eating.
Yep.
I think.
So your dad does majority of the cooking at home?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. My dad, ever since I was little, like mum would cook. Mum has like her things that she cooks. Like she likes cooking. She has like a soy sauce chicken and a quiche and a cake. She does desserts, but dad just like has always done the cooking. And he'll cook anything. Like he's Chinese, but he'll literally, everyone's like, oh, does he just make Chinese food? And I was like, no, he makes like everything, like curry. It also depends what he's watched on TV. Like if he's watched something, he's like on a French cooking show, the next day we'll be eating French food, like but he doesn't quite follow the recipe, and I think he adds soy sauce to everything because I think he thinks soy sauce makes everything better. Yeah.
Has he ever ended up cooking something that was really like out of the ordinary that you've gone, what have you done?
One time he tried to do a dessert and he never does dessert, and it was okay, but I remember it just my mum was like, what the hell are you doing? Because like he was using the wrong utensils and he was like doing it all wrong, and my mum, I remember that she was so mad. It was actually fine. I'm trying to think, nothing like way out there, but like memorably recently, like he's done like ramen and pho, so things that like require a lot of time. Yep. But he'll be like, oh fuck this, like I'll just do it in like a day. And you're like, Dad, it takes like, you gotta like boil down the bones and all that. He's like, nah, I'm doing it my way. But couple of curries are interesting. Like just depends what he's watched on TV.
Yeah.
But
that's good though. He's experimenting. Like he's drawing on all these outside influences and then just going, okay, well let's try and piece it all together.
And add soy sauce.
So I guess from a primary school wise, like which primary school did you go to?
Our Lady of Dollars, Chatswood. So just
Our Lady of Dollars.
Yeah, which isn't like money dollars. They explain it to us. Okay. I think it's meant to be like her like Our Lady as in Mary.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to get this wrong. I feel like it had something to do with like her burdens or like her 7 sorrows or something. I don't know. Anyway, it was a little school just opposite Chatswood Chase. Yep. So I was there like kindergarten to year 6.
Yep.
And then I went to Loreto Kirribilli from 7 to 12.
Yeah. And I guess, how would you describe yourself as a primary school kid?
That's such a funny question. I was a huge tomboy. Yep. Like I remember it was funny. I remember thinking all the girls would like, and this, I think like from K to year 3, everyone just played. But then from about like year 3 to year 6, like the girls would start kind of like pairing off and like sitting down and eating lunch, and like they'd like sit
doing different things. Like,
and there'd always be a group of guys playing soccer.
Yep.
And I would always be playing soccer or handball or whatever it was with the guys. Like I was always
more into the sports.
Physical
activity.
Yeah, like I never really understood. I'd be like, why are they sitting down and like talking? That's so weird. And then I think I would just say like tomboy for sure, like just sports. I wasn't very girly. Hated wearing skirts. I always wore shorts. And then I was probably a bit nerdy as well because like I was playing a lot of piano and reading a lot and stuff. But So
okay, so what age were you introduced to the piano?
Oh, like 4.
4.
Yeah. So my parents put us all the kids through Yamaha. Mm-hmm. And so I started group piano lessons at like 4 or 5. Yeah.
So group piano lessons. So what, they'd have like say 10 kids or something.
Yeah.
And they've all got their own keyboard.
Mm-hmm. So you'd be in a room and there'd be like 2 rows and there'd be like 4 little keyboards per row, and then at the front was a grand piano or like a upright piano, and then that's where the teacher was. And it was more about listening. Mm-hmm. And then you'd have like everyone had the same little like funny book. And then so you actually wouldn't do a lot of singing. Like with Yamaha, it was a lot about developing your oral skills.
Yep.
So you do a lot of singing and like kind of identifying notes with your ear, kind of like just more oral training, but then a little bit of playing. And then as you got older, then you do more and more like learning how to read the notes. And so it's funny because I think I feel like I learnt how to read music before I could read. Do you know what I mean? Because and it's funny, like people always, like especially because I do a bit of teaching, and then and when I'm trying to teach kids how to read notes, to me it's like I've always just known
how to do it.
And and I can
a second nature.
Yeah, exactly. Training, right? And I can like pitch notes, like I can just hear what notes they are. It's kind of got like perfect pitch. So someone can play a C and I just know it's a C. Like me and my brother have that. So it's actually quite difficult when I teach because I'm just thinking like, why don't you just get this? Like, it's like reading, like come on. So yeah, they introduced me at 4, and so it's kind of been a part of my life forever. Yeah. Like I just can't think of a time when I didn't play piano really.
I think that's actually really, I find that really interesting that the way that they tried to develop your listening skills, because I think, you know, it's something that I struggle with. I play a little bit of music. And, you know, obviously my parents put me through piano and that sort of thing as well. But even like, so my wife's obviously really into her music as well. And she plays at church and, you know, does a bit of singing and all that sort of stuff. And like when we sing, like I struggle so hard when it comes to trying to do any sort of harmonization and things like that, because I get carried, right?
Yeah.
I'm just like, I just haven't trained that part of my ear to be able to separate. Like, and sometimes it's like, I can hear it.
Yeah.
But there's no connection between what's going into my ears and what's coming out of my mouth. And I just feel like, I'm so
frustrating.
Yeah. Like it just really frustrates me, right?
Yeah.
And then like, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, you can like, you know, you have a good day and it just all sort of falls into place.
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, I guess I don't really like practice music much anymore or do anything like that. So, you know, it's sort of that skill probably
you haven't developed it.
It'd take a lot more refining, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that like that perfect pitch is a skill, or do you think it's something that some people innately have?
I think with perfect pitch, it's something you innately have, because I feel like, so me and my brother had it, and we've had it since we were kids. And I think as a kid, I didn't know I had it. I just knew, oh, that's a C, that's a D sharp. So I think it's something people have, and I actually think I was better as a kid than I am as an adult. But I do think it's something you can develop. So I think it's a bit of both. There's also a thing like called relative pitch, where if you know, say you know where C is or what C sounds like, you can then pitch every note because you know you have your bass, right? So, and like at uni, we used to have to do like transcribing. So you'd listen to a melody and you have to write out rhythm and notation. So it's obviously something you can develop, because if you couldn't, then everyone, like most people would just fail. Yeah. But for me, it was something I just had and didn't really realize I had it till probably like high school, when I started having to do exams. And then people would be like, how do you know what note that is? And I'd be like, well, it's just a C. Like I just know it's a C. And it's interesting because my older brother had it, and I didn't meet too many people at uni who had it, but one of the guys I work with, he's got perfect pitch as well. So it's just one of those random things that like people seem to have it. But I'm pretty glad I have it. Yeah. Well, makes my life a lot easier as a musician.
No, that's cool. So in primary school, like how often would you be going to those music classes?
So I would have it's funny, like I had the same piano teacher for like, I don't know. So my very first Yamaha teacher became my like private piano teacher. So he knew me, or still knows me. I don't have lessons anymore, but so from like 4 till like, I must have stopped when I was about 19. So I'd have them every week with him. We called him Mr. Eddie. His last name's Bailey, but for whatever reason we just called him Mr. Eddie. Okay. And so me and my brothers would have a lesson with him every night, and it was kind of unusual. Like I feel like this is super not legit, but at the time when you're a kid you're like whatever. But like he'd come over. He'd usually come around 6. So he worked at Combank, I think, at the time. So he had another job, but he obviously loved teaching and was super passionate about music. He was a pianist, obviously. And so he would come over, and we'd be like his only students. I think he didn't do that much teaching. But so he'd come over like at 7. And then we'd have our lessons, and they were kind of meant to be like 45 minutes to an hour, but depending on what was going on, sometimes I literally just have this lesson for like 2 hours.
Wow.
And so I wouldn't get to bed till like I don't know, like maybe 11. Like I'd be having my piano lesson in my pajamas and like my parents were like, whatever. Occasionally my mum was like, fuck, like that was only meant to go for an hour, but she's been playing for 2 hours. Like what the hell? I've only budgeted for an hour. Like,
and did he charge the same amount? Or?
I can't remember. I can't remember. I think he was pretty good. But then I remember thinking like, cause he had a small, like when I got into my teenage years, we were still doing this. And then he obviously he was older, he had kids, and he had young kids. My mum would always be like, oh, like you better appreciate these lessons because, you know, Eddie's spending all this time with you and not even his young kids because he'd be here till like 11. And then like if I had an exam or something, he'd just be like, sometimes he wouldn't leave till like 11:30. My parents would be asleep and he'd walk out and be like, all right, see you.
Oh, wow.
Like he'd have to like walk out.
He was so invested in you guys.
Yeah, which I think like super lucky to have. Like I remember there was a period during my HSC and I obviously I was taking music as an elective, and there was a period where he might have had to have taken a job in Hong Kong.
Yep.
And I remember I was like devastated because I was like, oh man, like who's going to be my teacher? Like this guy's been with me since I was 4. And it's funny because he taught my older brother and he taught my younger brother. I have another older sister, but she didn't pursue piano as seriously. But yeah, I think I was really lucky to have someone that invested in me and who, like I like personally as a teacher, I couldn't see myself doing that with my students. Yep. It probably sounds really bad. Yeah. But it's just like that level of like he really cared. Yep. And so
it could have also been a reflection of, you know, your own, like I would say to be good at anything, you'd have to have a mild obsession, right? Yeah. So the simple fact that you had the ability to focus for that long in a piano lesson, like for a lot of kids, they'd struggle, right? Like, you know, to do something for 2 hours would be unheard of for most kids. I guess so. You know, you'd do something for maybe half an hour and that would be somebody's limit in terms of focus. But you obviously were quite passionate from that young age, right? And so for him, you know, to be able to see that and then invest in that, I think he probably would realise that there'd be a return, right? Yeah. So did you ever have music classes at primary school?
We had our like school one.
Yep. Or band or anything like that?
Yeah, I was in the band, concert band. And actually, I had a really lovely band director. He was called Mr. Davidson, and I started piano at 4, and then I picked up flute in like year 2, and then I picked up saxophone in about year 5. So I was playing 2 instruments, and I kind of alternated in the band. Like some days I do flute, some days I do saxophone. And I remember I was the only girl playing saxophone. I don't know why I remember, but it was quite funny because, you know, like all the boys, and then I came in, and then like I'd be like the first chair in saxophone, and then all the boys would be, why is she like first chair? And I was like, well, I'm better than you. And so, but he was cool because I remember he kind of saw that I had some talent with these instruments. And so he was the band director at Our Lady of Dollars, which is a primary school. And then next to Our Lady of Dollars is St. Pius and there's Mercy College, which are the girls' high school and the boys' high school. And so when I got to about year 5, year 6, he let me play in the high school bands, which was really cool. So he also spent a lot of time like, I think like sometimes in lunchtime I'd hang out and a couple of other kids would hang out. We just play our instruments, hang out with him because he was always really funny. He was the kind of person that like you could kind of be a bit cheeky to like as a teacher and he'd just kind of like he'd go with it. He wouldn't be like super strict and be like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. He just kind of fostered that love a bit as well with me. And I think that was also really nice because he would also spend time. He'd like make sure I felt comfortable in this like high school band. He'd give me like harder parts. So, you know, like I was challenged. And then I remember we had like this end of year concert and, you know, like he'd give me an opportunity to like perform in front of people and stuff like that. So that was good because I guess like Eddie was my piano teacher, but then for flute and sax, I had other teachers, but I also had him kind of like doing that with me. And so it was nice to have that support as well for those instruments. And
were those instruments that you chose or did somebody make that decision for you?
I'm pretty sure my dad did. I think my dad has this habit of like, he'll just like, he'll just buy something and be like, this is your new hobby. And you're like, okay, like, all right. So I actually think at the time, so band did this thing where like, go and the band plays and you sit in and you kind of like if you're interested, you pick an instrument.
Yep.
And so I think for flute, I picked the flute. And then, so my dad's kind of funny because he loves jazz and Cuban music and stuff. So he got the idea that I think he kind of wanted to make his own family band.
Okay.
And he wanted...
Sorry, and so let me just interrupt you there. So does your dad play instruments, obviously?
No, he actually doesn't, but he got some conga lessons.
Okay.
But he actually, like, neither of my parents ever formally learnt music. No.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's another kind of interesting fact. So I think he loved listening to jazz, loved listening to Cuban music, and I think he was like, oh, you know what? Let's get one of the kids to play saxophone. And so I was kind of like the best option because I'd already picked up flute and the fingerings and all the stuff. I think at the time I wanted to learn violin and cello, and my parents were like, no way, because I guess learning is such an ear sore because you're still figuring out tuning that it sounds awful.
Oh, okay.
So they were like, no, like piano, it doesn't really sound bad because it's already in tune. You just press it.
Yeah.
Whereas violin, I think they were like, we're not sitting through that shit. So here's a flute, here's a saxophone. So, yeah, I think flute I wanted to play, and then saxophone, Dad kind of convinced me, which was fine. Like I was like, okay, cool. And I actually think I like piano is my instrument, but after piano, saxophone's definitely my favorite to play. And then I like flute, but saxophone's more fun.
Yep.
So yeah, that was kind of his planning.
Okay.
For a family band.
Yep. And then just going back to, you know, those performing in the band and having those parts. Do you remember what your first performance was like? Was that like, were you nervous? What sort of emotions does that sort of bring to mind?
I think I had a lot of fun. I think in the band performing, there wasn't as much pressure, although occasionally like I do a solo and stuff. But I think because you're in a group, I loved it. So I don't remember feeling nervous in band. High school was a bit different because I had an even bigger formal concert, and it was in the town hall.
Yep.
And so you'd have to audition, and then you have to win your audition, and then they'd pick out of the winners to go into the final concert. And high school would actually be like my first time formally performing on piano. Like I'd done a couple of exams in primary school, not many. Like my parents didn't really care that much about getting the exams done, and neither did my piano teacher did a little bit, but like it was kind of like whatever. Like if you enjoy doing it, just enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
So for high school though, I remember I always feel nervous. Like I think the very first time was at a music festival. I would have been in year 9, and I was performing. I don't know. I feel like this conversation leads into more what I do today, because I remember I was performing a piece by Joe Hisashi, who's
I was actually going to ask you about this because I like Joe Hisashi as well, and when I was listening to some of your tracks, right? Like I was going to actually ask you if that was one of your inspirations, right?
Yeah.
So okay, we'll nerd out on that in a bit later, but let's go back to.
I feel like this kind of leads into that. So
yeah. So okay, well then talking about that then. So what was the first time, or what was your, like, when did you first experience listening to, I guess, one of Joe Hisashi pieces? Was it from one of the cartoon, the anime?
No, so my dad, everything comes back to my dad. Jesus.
Okay.
So Dad had listened to, I can't remember what movie it's from, but it's Summer. There's a piece called Summer.
Yep.
And I don't know which movie it's from, but Dad had watched that movie and he was like, oh, the music in this is great. Really so good. He actually bought the piano book, and at the time I wasn't quite up to the level, but my older brother was. So he got my brother to play Summer.
Yep.
And I have this memory, this is super weird, but I have this memory of like my brother's playing the piano and I'm listening. I'm on the couch. I think I'm drinking some milk.
Yep.
I remember we used to always warm it up to 45 seconds. Like that was the perfect temperature or perfect time. But anyway, so then I think at primary school, I remember thinking, oh, I want to play some of this. And I tried and I couldn't. Like I just wasn't up to that level yet. And then I started playing it. I feel like I started playing his music more before I started watching all the films. So I think I actually got into his music before the films. And then Because there's another piece called Ashitaka and San from Princess Mononoke that my brother played.
Yep.
And I always wanted to play that one. And then I think I remember when I finally watched the film, like the film's now my favorite film. Like my dog's called Mononoke. But I finally learned how to play it. But then me and my brother, this is my older brother Alex, we used to always have this thing where like we weren't allowed to play the piece that one of us had already played.
Okay.
Like it would cause arguments. Yeah. Like I feel like it's probably a competitive thing, but like we had like tears one time because I wanted to learn my dad's favorite song from my HSC and he was like outraged that I wanted to learn. Anyway, so yeah, stupid stuff. But as kids, you're like, it's like the most serious thing ever.
Sibling rivalry.
Yeah, sibling rivalry, right? So I picked a piece that my brother hadn't learned, which there was a couple, like I think Alex had learned 3 and I think it was called Hanabi, which I think is the name of the movie. Mm-hmm. And so I picked that for my year 9 music festival piece. And this is the first time I'd done the audition on piano. Like everyone knew I played piano, but I never bothered to like do this stuff. So like whatever. And then so I picked it, I won the audition and I got picked to go in the music festival. And I remember I played it and it went fine. I think I always mess up something, so I must have messed up something. But anyway, I played it and it was all good. And I remember afterwards, all these people were like, "Oh, you know, like wow, like that. I felt really emotional when you played." Like I think one teacher was like, "Oh man, I almost cried," or she cried, or whatever. And I remember thinking like, "Oh, like I kind of remember thinking like a bit of like a fraud because I was like, well, I just played this guy's music, like, and to me, like it was very emotional to me, like if I ever go to a Joe Hisashi concert live, like I just start crying. So emotionally, the music had a thing. Like I had a thing for it.
It has an impact
to me. Yeah. And so when I played it to these people and they had the same impact, I was a bit like, that's awesome. But I didn't feel like I did that. Like I felt like, and I'm not taking away from performing because obviously there is an art to performing. But in my head, for whatever reason, my year 9 self was like, oh, well, I didn't really do much. Like he wrote the piece. So I think that's kind of what then got me interested into writing music, because I was like, well, you know, like I want to try and emulate that in my own music. And so it's funny that you say when you listen to some of my stuff that makes you think of him, because he was like my number one. He was basically like my number one inspiration for ages until I kind of got into uni and did a bit more listening. Yeah. He was just, and people would say it. People would be like, "Oh, it kind of sounds a bit like, do you know that guy Joe Hisashi?" And I'd be like, "Fuck."
Yeah.
But
speaking of my own experience listening to Joe Hisashi, so I think I was exposed to Joe Hisashi through Princess Mononoke as well. Yep. So I think my brother must have had the movie or something like that, because I remember watching it in his room, because my brother had his own computer in his room, and and then from watching that movie, I started to try and find, you know, like, I guess who had done the music and things like that. And then I managed to work out, okay, it was Joe Hisashi. And I started going on this spree of just trying to download whatever music I could find of his, right? And funny you mentioned that track Summer, because that was one of my favorites as well. I think there was another one called Rain or something like Summer Rain or something like that. Yeah. But there was a couple of tracks that you know, like when I think I can actually hear it in my head because I probably listened to it that many times. Yeah. And so that's how I sort of got exposed to him. And I think, you know, I don't know if he does all the Studio Ghibli stuff, but he does majority. I think
he does a lot with Miyazaki. Anytime Miyazaki does a film, he does the music. Because Ghibli obviously releases stuff that isn't by him. But I'm pretty sure, anytime it's a Miyazaki film, it's Joe Hisashi. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I guess, you know, why I was going to bring it up is because I could, I think the same sort of connection that Joe Hisashi tries to put when you listen to that music and you try, and that emotional connection that you sort of get from it. Like I think there's two different experiences. There's one experience when you're actually watching the film or the anime or whatever, and that will give you one, I guess, type of emotion. Yep. And then there's a different emotion when you actually listen to just the music on its own without the film. Yeah. Right, because some of his tracks, I never watched the films that were attached to them. I only listened to the music, and you know, when I was first listening to your music, the first thing I was like, okay, these are like pretty much majority of these tracks are things that you could have a story to, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I actually when I was mucking around, in my young years on piano and things like that, like I had a few songs that I sort of banged together on piano that were also inspired, from that style of music. From a I guess a pop song kind of perspective, like they don't quite make sense because the timing changes, the mood changes, all that sort of stuff, and it's not just repeated 4 bars, right? But I think it's like it's storytelling without words, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
big time.
Yeah. So then, coming back to so after that performance in year 9, is that when you started? Did you start then trying to write music for yourself then, or when did that sort of come into it?
I think my first time writing music, we had to do it for school, like as a composition class. And I think year 10, I started thinking, I remember we had a little composition task that we had to do. Actually, no, it's earlier. So it's hard to, I can think of a couple things. So there was a piece I wrote, I can't remember. I think this would have been after. And so it's super random. And now I think about this, it's like, who was I kidding? So our neighbor so our family has a farm, and the neighbor opposite us on the farm, his brother made films.
Okay.
And I think this guy was making a feature film, and I had just tinkered around on the piano and written something. And the reason I'm bringing it out is just because I can remember it's related to the film. So I would have been in high school, and I think it would have been after, I feel like around year 10. So probably a year later, I think I started getting interested in writing music. And I remember I wrote that piece, and my dad sent it to our neighbor to send to this guy making a feature film.
Okay.
Which now I'm thinking that's ridiculous. Like this guy would have been like, what the fuck? But he actually was super lovely, and he was like, oh, this is a really nice piece of music, like keep it up kind of thing. But and then I remember I wrote a piece, and these are pieces outside of school composition. Yep. So they're things that I took the initiative to go and write.
To do it yourself, yeah.
And then there's one I remember I wrote for my best friend at high school, and I called it Anne. And I think I wrote that around 11, and it was just a little piano piece. So I think it was around year 10, year 11, I started getting into it. Just mainly little piano stuff, nothing. And I think probably because I would play a lot of Joe Sashi. Yep. So they were just little piano pieces. And then when I got into uni, that's when, I had to start writing bigger pieces and proper stuff.
So, just thinking about that, I remember let's talk about your writing process. Because would you play and then notate, or would you, what would you do?
Yeah. So the writing process sucks. It's so hard. And you hear stories where people are like, I just thought of this melody in a dream. That's happened to me once, and it was crap. I listened to it the next day, I was like, this is rubbish. But so I feel like I've finally the past couple of years come to a process, whereas at uni I feel like I just winged it.
Yep.
But so what I like to do is I always like to sit at the piano. So I don't like to sit at the computer, and I will just usually I have an idea, or I've got a brief or something that's a piece for something, or a piece about this, or something, or sometimes it's literally just I just feel like writing some music. So I'll just sit at the piano. I'll generally turn my phone on to record, and I'll just improvise. And generally, I don't know, I could do that for 10 minutes. I could do that for half an hour. It just depends. And I'll just pick usually or hopefully something. I'll just come up with an idea from that I go, oh, that's actually quite interesting, or I feel something when I hear that. And then I'll just kind of take that, and then usually I'll go to my computer, and if it's for a piece for people to perform, I'll open up Sibelius, which is the scoring, proper notation software, and I'll go into and do that. Where if it's something for I don't know if you heard, so the pieces you probably heard on Spotify, the Noki stuff, I'll open Logic, which is more music production.
Yep.
And then start, filling in the sound, start bringing in strings and stuff. But usually it all just comes from me, mucking around on the piano, just coming up with ideas and recording them on my phone. So my phone thing has got idea from this date and idea from this day. It's just got full of all these random recordings. But I kind of like doing that because to me, it feels less forced than if I'm sitting there with pen and paper, like trying to think of these ideas.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's just kind of like the best thing that I thought of that day. Really becomes, just by chance, becomes this piece.
And so how often do you try and go through that? Like, do you sort of set time to do that, or is it just purely how you feel?
At the moment, it's purely how I feel. And I think that's because my job now is writing music.
Yep.
So, like, creatively you kind of get exhausted because it's like, oh, I've got 5 tracks to do this week. One's an action track, one's a tension track, whatever.
Yep.
But I'm finding myself, especially now during isolation, I'll do it when I have to do it when I feel like it. I can force myself to do it and I'll get something done, but
but you won't necessarily be happy with it.
Yeah, and I won't be like it's like trudging through the mud. It's so draining. Whereas when I feel like doing it, or when I feel like I get the urge to create something, then it's a lot more natural. And I feel like the ideas are more genuine. But sometimes like for example, I have a piece, I've been commissioned to write a piece, and so like I just have to get that done. Like I don't have time to sit around and be like, when I feel like I'll just do it. So I'll make time to do it for that. But generally, like for things like TV where it's like little like tracks for different shows, I'll just start at the computer. For someone's film, it's a bit different. Like if they want a theme and an idea, I'll spend the time creating that the same way I would do.
So you would have to watch the film first, or
it depends. Like you can do it both ways. You can, a lot of the times, by the time someone approaches me, the film isn't done, but they've got an edit, and it may not be. Actually, I've done it both ways. So, like for instance, I just did one this year where he hadn't shot it, but he approached me. He really liked my stuff, and we kind of came up with ideas as he was shooting and editing, and that was kind of nice in a way because, one, he was always listening to my stuff and my ideas, so it wasn't like he was like, oh, I love this Hans Zimmer track. Can you just do that? And you're like, well, fuck, like I'm not Hans Zimmer. Shit. You'd be surprised that happens. So that we kind of went through the score together. Whereas another film I did this year, he had done it. He hadn't put any music in, which was good, but he had the final edit and was like, look, I'm thinking these kind of tracks for these sections. And that also was really good because he knew exactly what he wanted. He knew exactly what emotion. And for me, I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I know this is going to work because this is what he said he wants. Sometimes it gets tricky when you get a bit of in between where, like, they think that's what they want. And it's not what they want. Yeah. But then they, like, don't know.
Exactly, and then you're like,
this is going to take a while.
Yeah. And it's a lot of back and forth too, right? Like,
a lot of back and forth. So I guess depending on what I'm writing for, it's a different process. But when I'm writing for myself, it's always start at the piano, record, see what kind of comes from that.
Yeah. So like I remember I when I was dabbling on the piano, I'm going to talk about it. I don't really otherwise share these stories, right? Like I don't really talk about it. But so I wrote. I wouldn't say I write music because I never ever put it into any notation. It's just like I remember how to play it. And it's there.
Still writing it.
Yeah, but it's not written, right?
It's just right.
But I like, so for me, how that came about was like, I think probably the first piece I ever did was, it's embarrassing, but it's for a girl. So, and then the second piece I think was something that I wrote was inspired a bit by Joe Hisashi. But I think the third piece that I wrote was like, because my dog passed away. And obviously, you're dealing with that emotion of that, right? And, like to me, it wasn't like anything that I never really, it wasn't something that, and I think this is me with a lot of things in my life, right? Where I might have some like small ability in it, but I don't necessarily have the obsession with it. Like I think there's only really a couple of key things in my life that I've been obsessed about, and they're probably like martial arts and, my working career at some point, they're probably the two things that I've been most obsessed about in my life. And now obviously my family comes into that, but like that's why I was curious about, you know, how you sort of put that your writing process together, because, you know, when I think back on those sort of 3 types of tracks that I sort of came up with, that was sort of, you know, the catalyst for me.
Yeah.
Is there any track from that really has like a deep emotional connection for you?
Yeah. So there's so if you go on Spotify, I've released under the name Noki, and there are 2 tracks on there that are just like you said, they were catalysts. So one of them is called Departures, and that's when my grandfather passed away I think it's 2 years ago he passed away. And I remember I probably wrote that piece in like, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, something, just quick. Like it just came, and it was just like the grief. But also he was quite old, and I think he was always like super happy. Like he's probably like the most easygoing guy ever. And I remember when he died, we were all really sad, but like my dad said this thing about, you know, like I think it's a Chinese thing that's like a laughing funeral. Like you're kind of it's sad that he died, but he had such a long, good life that you kind of celebrate that. So I wrote this piece and it's called Departures. I think at the time when I wrote it, it was just called Yeah for him. But so there's that one, and that, funnily enough, is probably one of my most listened to pieces on that list of like Spotify stuff.
And just to clarify, so isn't like
yeah.
it's actually the Chinese words for
it's not like a party rave song. Although he probably would have loved that, actually. He probably would have been like, good. And then the other one on there that was triggered, actually my brother asked me to write this. So he got married in I think not last year before, I think. Or maybe it was, anyway, recently. And it was funny. He asked me to write this piece, and I wrote something, and I was practicing it to play at his wedding. So he wanted me to write something so they could do during the signing of the papers during the wedding.
Yep.
And I wrote this thing, and I was practicing it. I had probably written it like months earlier. Like I was like, oh man, I got to make sure this is good. And I was practicing, and I was like, this does not. It just didn't. It was fine as a piece of music, but I was like, this is not really
what you wanted.
Yeah,
it didn't resonate.
Yeah, I was just like, well, I don't know. I don't even remember what I did with that piece. Anyway, and so then I was like, no, I got to write something else. And I remember this night because I was going to a Muay Thai fight night that night, and so I think I had like a couple of hours before I had to go watch the fights, and I think again I just wrote this piece and like, I don't know, it would have been like an hour and a half, and it's called Prelude, and it's also on Spotify, and it's just solo piano. And I kind of was a bit annoyed because I was like, man, I spent all that time on that other one, and then I was like, nah, fuck it, I'll just do this one. And it's quite popular on that list. So they're probably the 2 that I can think of very early, but this is like would have been first year uni. I wrote a piece for my grandma again when she passed away. So I think definitely there are catalysts.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing you can't force, because like it just happens and you just write it and it's just done.
Yeah, you either capture that moment or it's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's in the moment. It like comes to you, and then whether it's an inspiration from wherever it is, like you know, it's you either get it or you don't.
Yeah.
Do you find that when you're writing music or, you know, like trying to put stuff together, that the key finds you, or do you just pick a key?
I have favorite keys.
Yep.
So I love any keys with the flats. So like D flat, A flat, like all the black notes on the piano. Yep. I'm trying to think. I think both my grandfather's piece and the piece I wrote for my brother, they're in flat keys. So I think one's in like they're always like major minor, like there's always a bit of both, but I think Alex's is in like A flat something, and then my grandfather's one is like B flat minor or F minor. Anyway, so yeah, I do have a preference for flats, so I gotta sometimes force myself not to play in those because I'll just fall back onto them.
Yeah, but don't you think, I always think, you know, like, and maybe it's just a resonance thing, like with the frequencies or whatever, but certain songs, like even if you transpose the key, it definitely doesn't sound as good, right?
I had this thing where I wrote this piece for my school, my old high school. They wanted like 100-year anniversary piece, and so I wrote it for them, and they kept complaining that the part was too high, and so I transposed it. I went from G major to F major, so not a big jump, but it was fine, but it just didn't feel the same. And so for sure, I think certain keys
lend itself,
it just doesn't. Yeah, there's definitely something in that.
Yep.
Whether it's scientific or not, I don't know. But yes, I would agree.
So, okay, so you also mentioned the Muay Thai fight night, so I want to touch a little bit on that, and then I'm going to go back to transition from high school to uni. So when did your sort of fascination with martial arts begin?
So I think I always was interested in doing martial arts and fighting. I think, so when I was younger, so there's like a 5-year difference between me and my older brother, and then 7 between me and my eldest sister. So I remember when I was little, they did karate. Yep. And when I was growing up, I was like super excited because like, oh man, like I can't wait to start karate. And then by the time I got up to the age where they wanted to do karate, my dad was like, nah, we're not doing karate anymore. And I was like, what? So I didn't get to do it then. And I think it comes from a love of like, I used to watch Dragon Ball Z with my brother and stuff, and a lot of anime. Like I think we watched Evangelical and stuff like that. So, and my dad watched a lot of action stuff. So there was kind of interest there. So I didn't get to do karate. And then I remember when I was about 11, my brother started doing Kung Fu. And I was like, oh, I want to do Kung Fu. And then at that age, we had bought the farm. And I'd go with my dad every weekend to the farm. So then dad was like, well, you can't do Kung Fu because you got to go like look after the animals and the horses on the farm. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to go. Yep. So it kind of just happened by chance. I would have been like first year uni. So I had a bit of time, and my sister at the time was dating a guy called Joe, and he's a brown belt now, but he was a purple belt. So she was dating Joe, and Joe is like he runs a gym, but at the time he was just doing personal training. Yep. And so we started training with him, just doing personal training stuff. And then I can't remember how the conversation went, but then I was like, oh, I think Nikki mentioned he did martial arts, and I was like, oh, I've always kind of been interested in that. And he was like, oh, did you know there's a really good gym just down the road from your house? Yep. And that was VT1. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was just like, I remember I went in with my mum, even though I was like 18. And I think because we were driving at the time, and I was like, oh, why don't we go check out this gym? And so I just went in, and they're like, what are you interested in? And I was like, I don't know. And then they're like, oh, well, we got like jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, MMA. And I was like, well, I'll just pick MMA because that's got everything. Yep. And so I just started doing MMA with like no idea of like the UFC or jiu-jitsu or anything. And this was 6 years ago, so it probably wasn't, almost 7. So it wasn't as big as it is now. Like UFC is pretty mainstream. Yep. And then, so it was really just Joe at the time being like, oh, there's a really good gym down the road from your house. And I just walked in, and I was like, okay, this will do. Yep. Like, I didn't know anything.
No research, no nothing. Just
nothing, literally nothing. I don't even think I knew what jiu-jitsu was. Like, and I think I remember thinking, oh, I knew like what WWE was. That was probably it. I remember thinking that's so dumb. Like, it's not even real. Yeah. But I just loved it. I think I also at the time was kind of getting more into fitness. And so, because I had been training with Joe and I started running and stuff like that. So it kind of all came together. And so I did MMA, and then I remember, so the reason why I picked up everything else was like, and I never wanted to really compete or fight really. I remember thinking, no, that's crazy. I'm not going to do that. But so I was doing MMA for like 6 months, and Liam wasn't my coach, but occasionally he'd come and take the MMA class. And I remember some like guys would come in, they'd be training for a couple months, and they'd just squish me. Yeah. And I'd be like, what the hell? Like, I should be kicking this guy's ass because I've been here for 6 months. Like, what's going on? And Liam be like, oh, well, you've got to do jiu-jitsu. Like, do jiu-jitsu. And I was like, all right, whatever. And then 6 months since I started jiu-jitsu, and yeah, I just loved it. And then it was kind of like, oh, well, your grappling's really good now, but your striking's not so good. So then I picked up boxing and Muay Thai. And so then I just literally ended up doing everything at the gym. And so, yeah, it's funny because like people who know me from the gym are like, what do you mean you do music? Yeah. And then like I'd go to uni, and like I'd have like an injury, or I'd have like a bruise. Like one time I had this big rehearsal and I had like a fucking black eye, and they're like, why do you have a black eye? And I'd be like, oh, well, you know, like I do martial arts. And they're like, what do you mean? I'd be like, oh, you know, like I do a bit of MMA. And people be like, are you crazy? Like what about your hands? Like, that's crazy. Like,
people don't really understand it.
No, they think it's like, well, like you say, like, you know, like they fight in a cage. As soon as you say cage, they're like, ew, like, what is that?
It's those memes that, you know, what people think I do, what my mum thinks I do, what my friends think I do.
Yeah. They think it's like Fight Club, like bare knuckle. Like, that's, I think, what they think of, especially at like uni where it's like very arty and like, I don't even think half the people there exercise. Like, I don't know. So it was a very funny kind of like, they're totally unrelated, but they kind of work together, I think. Like, so yeah.
You know, I would say they're both arts, right?
Yeah, for sure. They're both, you need to have a bit of creative thinking, I think, with both of them.
Yeah. But I think the thing that I always think about with any sort of artistic endeavor is that when you are going down those pathways, it is almost like speaking another language. Yeah. Right? So just the same way that, you know, and I think we all take it for granted, you know, when we speak in English or whatever language we're speaking, that other people can understand it, right? But just like how there's different levels of comprehension from like, you know, a primary school kid or a kindergarten school child to an adult or somebody with, you know, an education, a formal education in English versus, you know, somebody who's picked it up as a second language. Like there's a massive difference in the level of comprehension. And I think, you know, just the same way that we can appreciate that, there's levels to martial arts too, right?
Oh,
like,
for sure.
You know, everybody has that thing where, you know, you start and then you get crushed or squished and you just go, you know, how do I become that guy?
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people don't get there because they give up before they even get close to that because they just go, it's too much of a gap. Yeah. Right. Whereas, you know, like when you look at how, you know, and as we've all done, we all would have had to have learnt at some stage, you know, when you're a child, it's a natural progression that, you know, you go from not being able to move to being able to roll. And then when you can roll, then you can crawl and crawl to walk and then walk to run and then learning how to jump and all those sorts of things. Like you don't ever think, oh no, that's too difficult. Like you just slowly pick it up. Yeah. Right. So it's the same thing with anything sort of artistic as well. In my eyes anyway.
I think so. I think people think I think people just think you're born with it and you just wake up and you can just do it. Yeah. But like writing music, for example, it's like I've had ideas, but like I've had to train myself to do that. And it's the same with writing like martial arts, piano. Like I didn't just wake up and go, oh look, I'm really good at piano. Yeah. It's like a lot of hours.
Yeah, it's a lifetime work.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Yeah. So okay, so let's go back to then transition from high school to uni. Like I guess how would you describe yourself in high school first of all before we go to that?
High school, I feel like this is a better thing to ask my friends than me. I don't know. I think I feel like I had a lot of, well, actually, firstly, I was probably one of the few Asians at school. So me and my friend Anne would always like play that card, like we were the Asians. Yep. Because I think predominantly most of the girls at my school were white. Yep. And it wasn't really a thing, but I just remember we'd always like take the piss that we were Asian and like fuck around with that. But I think at school, I definitely wasn't like a cool person. I think, but I don't know, our year was interesting in that we had cliques, but I think for the most part, everyone was pretty friendly with each other. Like no one was, there were bitchy moments, but for an all-girl school, none of us really like, I don't know, I don't think any of us really bullied anyone or anything like that. I did have some street cred though because so I had this 16th birthday party and I was in year 11 and I remember thinking, oh man, like no one's going to come. It's going to be so lame. And it ended up being like this crazy party because, so I remember like my sister is really good friends with Danny Clayton, who at the time was a presenter on Channel V, and she was also dating a guy from the band Art vs. Science. So they all came to my birthday party and they were DJing and like it just ended up being super loose. Like it was just like a bunch of teenagers, pretty drunk. Like someone was like jumping off the roof into the pool and like there's like I remember Danny had like a goon bag and was like just squirting it at everyone, like goon Olympic. So it ended up just being crazy. And I remember it was funny because I went to school the next day and the like cool girls who I didn't invite because I wasn't like super close to them, but I remember there was talk being like, how did Cassie get like Danny at her party? Like how did she get the Art vs. Science guys? Like, and then it became known that the parents were also talking about the party because there was like some like parent teacher thing or not parent teacher, so like the parents get together and have dinner, which my parents never went because I was like, fuck that. Typical Asian parents like, no, I'm not going to drink wine with white people, like fuck that. So they're like, but it got told, like my parents got told that like they were talking like, oh, like Cassie had this wild party and it was out of hand and blah blah blah, and my mom was like, oh, I thought it was all right, like.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had a bit of cred from that, but I don't know. I think I must have been just like, I was the music chick for sure. Like I was like the school pianist. I wasn't that, funnily enough, I don't think I was that athletic at school. Like I hated carnivals. Yeah. Hated running. I used to always try to get out of them.
So the tomboyness that you had from years kindergarten to 6 we're gone. So there's no more. Was there any handball at lunch? Was there any soccer?
Well, because I went to an all girls school. No, like
that was all gone.
Just sit. Yeah. I think we sometimes played tennis, but like no, like I wouldn't do any of that. But also like because I spend most of my weekends at the farm. Yeah. Like almost all my weekends during high school I spent at the farm unless I had a party. So I would miss out on a lot of social events. Like I always remember thinking like, oh, like all the girls would talk about all the boys that they met, and I'd be like, spent the fucking weekend picking weeds with my dad. Like, so I never, like I didn't party.
I'm going to keep that as a note to myself for my daughter.
Yeah, get a farm, take her to that farm throughout her whole high school life, and she won't have a boyfriend. Trust me, it works.
Sweet.
But so like I wasn't a big partier. I think I just was like the music chick, but like I feel like I had friends and stuff, but I didn't feel like I had like a group. Yeah. Like I kind of would jump between groups, drift. And also because I went from my primary school to high school, none of my friends from primary school went with me. So I was completely by myself in high school.
Had to start new
So
relationships.
yeah, pretty much. But but I still have a couple of good friends. I think I've got like a handful of people I still talk to from high school, and but I think if anyone was just like sub me up real quick, I'd be like the music chick. For sure.
Did you ever like go to the music rooms at lunch and play music there?
Yeah, I think during my last years, yes, because part of my HSC syllabus was, because I picked music and music extension, I did all performance. So I had to prep 6 pieces. Yep. But like, so me and my really good friend Anne at the time, she also did music. So we just muck around in the music rooms and stuff. Yep. I think, I do think that early high school I found it hard. Like, and I wouldn't say I was ever bullied or anything, but I think everyone experiences this, like, just trying to fit in. You're not really sure where you fit in. You don't really know who your friends are because everyone keeps, like, I think people change so much during high school. Yep. So I do remember thinking a couple of lunchtimes, like, I just go, like, go and read in the library, or I just do my own thing because I just, you know, like, I'd be sitting in with a group of girls and they'd be talking about the party they went to the weekend, and I'd be like, I've got nothing to add to this conversation. Yeah. Like, fuck. Yeah. And so I do think it took me a little while to kind of find, like, the people I was most comfortable with. Yep. And I still think they're still the people. Actually, Anne is someone who I've mentioned a couple of times who I haven't talked to in a while, but I think I'd like to. But yeah, I think I eventually found the people who I was like most comfortable with.
Yeah. And I think there's also an element there though, like, you know, everybody's going through their own things as well.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
Like nobody really knows exactly what's going on in your own home life. Like I've got like, you know, my group of high school mates that I still obviously stay in contact with. But I also had another mate, we used to call him Big Ben because there was 2 Bens. There was 2 Ben Wongs in our grade.
Like same last name.
Yeah, same name. Right. So we used to either say Little Ben or Big Ben to try and differentiate.
Right.
But originally it was Crazy Ben or Big Ben because Little Ben was a bit crazy. I don't even know where he's ended up, but anyway.
Like crazy, just like energetic, or like he did crazy shit?
He just did crazy shit. Yeah, like, okay, so to give you an idea, I think, you know, I can remember this one story where I think we were in woodwork and he was sick or something, and then he was like, I see purple spots. And it was just like, the way he carried on was like, you know, that's why we called him Crazy Ben. Right?
Makes sense.
And so Big Ben was one of the, the other Ben. And he was obviously really into music as well. And so we would sometimes obviously hit the music rooms, you know, in that later part of high school. And actually, I think, you know, my wife often tells me this because she was in the grade below and she was obviously into music and stuff like that. So I think, you know, she also used to go with some of her friends to the music room. And so, you know, Big Ben and I would just, you know, bash away on the piano and do that sort of stuff. And then, but I think my wife can sort of remember some bits and pieces of her, you know, us being in like the same sort of area.
Yeah.
yeah, like, and like, I think at that time, I was going through some things in my own family situation, which is why I was like, more into the music and stuff like that, as an outlet.
Yeah.
I was still obviously mates with, all my other mates and things like that. But I think at that point I was just, really into that for probably, I needed that sort of emotional outlet, which I didn't really get otherwise.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, so then how did you already know at the end of high school what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think the whole time, actually no. So I think I was always, so I love animals and anything to do with animals. So I think for a long time I thought I was going to be a vet, and my parents were like, sweet.
Okay.
Like, good money, got a farm, we're set. And then me and two of my friends, or three of my friends, we used to watch this series on ABC called Spooks, and it was about MI5. So I went through this period in like year 10 where I wanted to be a spy.
Okay.
I could definitely not be a spy. Like, I've got anxiety. Like, I'd fucking lose it every time I audition. But I remember going to, like, we had like careers day or whatever, and you had to go in, and I remember it was my history teacher was doing my interview, and she was like, all right, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be a spy. She was like, no, seriously, like, what do you want to do? I was like, at that time I was dead serious. I was like, I want to be a spy. Like, what do I do? And then she was like, she had no clue. She was like, well, maybe you could be like a diplomat, and then from there get into espionage. And I was like, this chick's got no idea. So I like looked up ASIO and all this stuff, and like I was so into it. And then I think I realized, like, I do not have the personality to be a spy. Like, I would not be able to keep my cool. I'd freak out.
Did you tell your parents that you wanted to be a spy?
I can't remember. I think maybe, and they're like, whatever. Like, I think the good thing about my parents is they never pushed me towards anything. Like, they'd always joke, like, be a doctor. Actually, my dad has this joke that he's raised a bunch of hipsters with his 4 kids, because none of us have, like, the typical good career, like, that every Chinese parent wants, right? So, but I think I just knew I wanted to do something in music, because I think obviously by late high school I realized I'm actually good at this. Like, I don't think I actually realized I had a talent as such until maybe high school, and then I was like, oh, you're actually quite good at this. Maybe I should do something with this. And so my piano teacher kind of pushed me towards piano performance, and I remember this was devastating because he got me an interview with one of the heads of piano at the conservatorium, and I didn't want to do it. Like, I just didn't want to go, but he was like, come on, you're doing really well.
Was that, and what was the reason why you didn't want to do that?
I just think didn't think I wanted to do piano performance, because in my head I knew, like, I'm not a prodigy. Like, I'm not one, and I think I kind of knew even at that point, like, to be a piano performer, not always, but for the most part, like, the people who are piano, like Lang Lang, for example, he's been doing that since he was a kid. Yeah. So unless you're like a prodigy, you're probably not going to make it as like a big piano star. I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do anyway. So I had to sit down and do this. I played for this guy. I can't remember his name. Ricard Ford, this is his last name. He's one of the professors, and he was nice, but he was like, look, I don't think you're cut out to do performance. And it was weird. I think because I was devastated, not because in my head I was like, oh, I didn't want to do that. But I think a bit embarrassed. And also I was a bit annoyed because like my music teacher was like, oh, you'll be so good. And my piano teacher was like, you got this. And I went and did it. And I was like, see you guys, like I'm not. Like, and it was ridiculous. But I think I knew, I was like, I don't want to be a teacher, even though I teach. And I think and anytime I wrote a piece of music, people were like, oh, this sounds like something that could be in a film, probably because of Joe Hisaishi. So I figured, well, I'm not going to play piano. I'm not going to be a piano performer, but I think I want to write music. Mm-hmm. And so I remember, for the conservatorium, you have to submit, if you want to do a Bachelor of Music in composition, you have to submit a portfolio. So I had like 2 pieces, and I remember I didn't have a third one, so I like wrote this like weird jazz classical saxophone thing, and it was crap. But I was like, shit, I need to do something, and I just sent it off. And so I think by like year 11, 12, I was thinking music, and then kind of solidified, well, I'm not going to do piano performance because of that awful experience. And I think so that's kind of how I just. and I always find it weird because, like, you know, you meet people and they're like, music is my life. Like, I love this. Like, I can't live without music. I can't breathe. I don't think I'm one of those people. I personally, I think it just happened to be music. Like, I feel like I could have picked, very easily, I could have picked, like, art or graphic design or something and different. That could have been it.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I just think, I'm not quite sure why music, but I think I just was good at it and I felt passionately about it enough that I was like, well, why not just try writing music?
Yeah.
And I think Joe is actually, at that time, probably the biggest influence. Yeah.
Yeah. So then to get into the, how do I pronounce
Conservatorium?
Conservator. Huh? Wouldn't it be a conservatory?
They just call it Sydney Conservatorium.
Okay.
I've never questioned. Maybe. I don't know.
That's what I was just thinking. Is it a conservatory or a conservatory?
I don't know what's the difference.
Yeah. That's all right. English is full of those things. It's like flammable and inflammable. I'm still waiting for somebody to tell me the difference.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah.
Okay, English is not my strong point. Never has been.
So it was to get into that. Did you have like it's not a standard pathway, is it? Like, do you go through HSC or what do you do? How does
So the con, to get into the con, it's a mixture of, it depends what you want to specialize in for your bachelor's, but basically they basically do it on a score system. So they take into account your ATAR.
Yep.
And then I think everyone does an interview, or maybe for composition you have to do an interview because you have to show your portfolio. Obviously, if you're trying to get into a Bachelor of Music in performance on an instrument, you just do a blind audition or whatever. So then they tally up a score from your interview and your ATAR, and then whoever, I guess, gets the highest, whoever makes the cutoff of numbers that they put in. So I had a really good ATAR, and then
What did you get?
97.6 or something.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good ATAR.
It's pretty good. Pretty happy with that.
Yep.
Actually, I was pissed off because my ATAR calculator told me more. I think it told me I got 98 and I got 97. And I was like, this is bullshit. Not that it really matters.
Yeah.
Especially
but at the time,
music.
at the
time,
you do think about that sort of stuff. Yeah.
You want to get the best you can. But and I remember, it's funny. So I had my interview at the con and his name's Michael Smedinen, and he's actually a really nice guy, but if you've never met him before, he's really standoffish. And I think maybe perhaps he puts this on. Yeah. Because as I got to know him as a lecturer, he was actually he was a pretty cool guy. So I remember just thinking, crap, like, I'm not getting in. Like, this guy hated me. Yeah. And I remember, I think I might have mentioned I was interested in film, and I think at that time, film music wasn't really what they were looking for. They're looking for people to be composers, writing music for orchestras and ensembles and lecturing and all that stuff. So I kind of felt like I dug myself a hole when I was like, oh, I like film music and I'm interested in that, because it was just like, meh. And then,
so did you before you went to the interview? Did you prepare for it, or what? What did you have to prepare? So
you submit a portfolio. I think that's all I had to do. So I submitted my Year 11 composition piece, my Year 12 composition piece, and the shit one that I wrote in a month, because I was like, I haven't done this. Because I think for most kids, they would have picked composition as an elective in music. Okay. So they would have already had their 3 pieces. Whereas I picked performance because I was like, well, I'd rather just sit and play piano as a subject. And so I just had nothing prepared. So I don't remember if I prepared anything externally. I do remember, so I did an interview at the con, and I think anyone can do an interview if you've selected for your UA or whatever. And then UNSW was more general, I remember. So you submitted some pieces and you also had to play. Yep. And I remember I had a really good interview at UNSW. The lady there, I don't remember her name, but she was super, super chirpy. She seemed I've gotten the impression that, I'd probably get into UNSW. And so when I got into the con, I was like, I was super happy, but I think my dad was a bit like, I would have preferred if you gone to UNSW, because he went to UNSW. Okay. And I was like, well, Dad, but this is the conservatorium. This is crazy. No one gets into the conservatorium. He was like, yeah, I guess so. Because I think at that time, I think in my year, there might have been 15 to 20 people, including international students. So it's pretty tight. Yep. It's very competitive. And and for something that I like had only really decided in like the past couple of years, I guess I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make the cut for this. So yeah, I was pretty surprised. But to be honest, I think doing what I do now, I probably didn't need to go to the conservatorium, but I guess I'm glad that I had that, I guess, formal.
It's that training, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say that as well. Like, you know, I probably don't need my degrees in terms of what I do from a working basis, but the foundation that it gives you, you know, because I did engineering and law, so having that understanding of contracts and things like that, then that definitely helps.
Feeds into other stuff,
So for business, from a business perspective, like I think those sorts of things you can't really deduct from that. Like, but I feel that way about a lot of the learning that I've done. Like, you know, I had to do TAFE when I was doing my mechanical apprenticeship. And, you know, like Ange always says, oh, you love TAFE. And I'm like, yeah, because the learning's different, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
And having done both, like, you know, being fortunate enough to have done both, like the tertiary education at uni as well as TAFE education. The TAFE stuff is more applicable to, like, you know, like on the job style of training.
I can imagine.
Whereas, you know, when we go to uni, it's a lot of theory.
Conceptual.
Yeah, it's a lot of conceptual stuff, and we're sort of, you know, painted a picture of what it's supposed to be like, and you're doing it's almost like you're doing a simulation, but you're not doing the real thing. Yeah. Whereas at TAFE, it's like you're actually doing the real thing. You know. Yeah. And I can't say that for every course, but I can say that at least for, you know, I guess my experience between, say, engineering and doing, you know, light vehicle mechanics at TAFE. Like, it's one's very hands on. The other one, you know, you never touch a tool really. Like, you know, you build a spaghetti bridge, or, you know what I mean? Like, you do that sort of stuff as opposed to, you know, here's a spanner. Yeah. You know, what size is it? Work out how to take that out and pull this apart and put it back together, et cetera, et cetera. So, in terms of, like, so what was the learning like at the con? Was it like, you know, were you there 5 days a week, or what was the structure like?
Pretty loose. Like, it got more loose the later years, because obviously, like, you start doing your thesis and then you only have to come in. So I remember I never had Fridays, which was great. The composers never had to do Fridays. So it was 4 days a week. I can't remember exactly my hours, but it was more at the start, because everyone has to do a certain amount of units for oral skills and history. Yep. And then once you get into, like, third year, you can kind of taper off and pick what you want. So, but I don't think I ever had over 20 hours at uni. So it was pretty chill, but I think a lot of it was assumed that you were doing a lot at home, obviously writing. So every year you had to present a portfolio of works. And then I ended up doing my honours year and doing a thesis. So by, like, my final year, I feel like I had one elective class, and then I'd go in to see my supervisor. Yeah. And then that was it. So it was interesting in that, like, as a composer, we were kind of in, like, this weird corner of the con. And so we were kind of like the weird ones that you never really saw, because, like, obviously all the performers, like, they do all their ensemble stuff together. So if you're in orchestra, you do orchestra together. You do like, or if you're in a modern music ensemble, you do that. Whereas composers, it was like the only time we'd kind of socialize with other people in, like, would be like those shared classes, which got less as you went up. And then when you had to find someone to play your piece, then you'd kind of get to know the other performers. But I don't know, I feel like I only really talked to one other guy who I went to uni with. He's another composer. He's really, I kind of feel like I didn't, I don't know, I think I, like, didn't quite fit into the academic world. Yep. Like, I did well at uni, but I just wasn't an academic. And I wasn't that, like I said before, like, I wasn't ever like, music is my fucking passion of life. So I did find the con a bit suffocating. Like, I liked my time there, but at the same time, I was kind of like, I don't think this is for me. Yeah.
Do you also think that some of those people are, and you know, this is no slight on anyone, but it's just like, you know, do some of those people say that because they feel like that's what they need to say because they're there?
Yeah, I think so.
Like, that's one of the things that I always, you know, I don't like about any sort of, I guess, you know, when you think about a lot of industries where there's a lot of pressure to be a certain ideal, right? And, you know, like, in a lot of industries, there's that pressure to have to conform to a certain ideal, and you know, I don't agree. Well, personally, I don't agree with it, because at the same time, you know, like for me, it's like one of those things where if I had to sort of conform to those sorts of things, I'd probably be like, well, fuck that, I'm not going to do it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess, you know, to give you an idea, right, like typically in the car business, right, like so most guys at my level would have an office with a desk and all that sort of stuff. Like, so the day that I walked into my current role, you know, I had my standing desk like in the back of my car. I had a half Bosu ball. Yeah, right. You know, and like I'm sure like everybody that was at that workplace was probably like, what the hell? Who is this guy? Like he's just coming in this weird eccentric, you know, with his stand-up desk and like so my office now, I don't have a normal table. Like I've got a round table where we can have meetings, and then I've got like I guess a credenza, which I put my standing desk platform on, and like and speaking from my own experience, like if it was me, say 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have the guts to do that. Right. Yeah. Like I would have felt like this innate pressure that you have to just be what people expect you to be, and you know do the things that people expect you to do. Whereas now it's like I think I'm more comfortable in my own skin to be able to say, well, this is how I do it, right? Yeah. And, you know, if you don't like it, well, maybe I'm the wrong guy. Like, at the end of the day, I have a specific way that I like to do things, and how I've come to that pathway is because of my experiences and my learning, you know. And I think when you're earlier on in your career or in any of those sorts of endeavors, you're probably a lot more impressionable. Yeah, right? For sure. So, because you want to fit in, you want to, you know, like be seen to be doing the right things. But you haven't really found your own way to make those things work. For sure. Right?
Well, like it's hard, like at the con, and I think this is probably with any creative thing, it's like they're always talking about finding your voice, but then like, do you really have a voice at that time? And I think I always had a bit of a conflict, because I think it's better now, but at the time I was at the con, it was like basically film music and pop music and stuff was kind of like, well, that's not really the same because it was commercial. And so I actually started working, like I had my first TV job at like 19, so second year uni. So I kind of worked on and off during uni. So
So how did that come about?
That was pure luck. So okay, as usual. So my sister's a photographer, and at the time she was assisting under a guy whose best friend was an exec at Channel 7. Yep. And so he knew I wrote music and was kind of interested in film music. So he was like, oh, I'll send you your details to this exec. And then she was like, oh, well, these guys are the guys who do a lot of our music. And it happened to be two guys called Adam and Dinesh, and they own this company called the DA's office.
The DA's
office? The DA's, because it's like Adam and Dinesh. So it's
DA, yeah.
It's got nothing to do with
the district attorneys.
Nah, which I think is quite clever. It's quite funny. It suits them because they're cool guys. So they so she sent my details to Adam because Dinesh is in LA, and I think Adam just got in touch and was like, hey, I heard you were interested, do you want to come and have a coffee or something? So I went and had a coffee with him, and I would just sit in watching him, and there was another guy who I now work with called Mitch, and they had this little studio in St. Leonard's, and I just sit in and watch them write. And at the time, so they're kind of, I guess, claim to fame is they did and still do the music for MasterChef. Okay. So when I went to go sit in and watch them write, they were doing a lot of, pretty much most of the time it was MasterChef, because you have to build this library. Yep. And I did that for about a year, and I was super shy. Like they'd be like, hey, you want to get lunch with us? And I'd be like, no, like I'm good. Like I'll just go home. Like, and now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that was so dumb. Like, why didn't you get lunch with them and like get to know them? But anyway, so I did this for about a year, and it's funny, like at the time I was like, I don't think this is for me. Like, I don't think I'm that interested in it. I'll probably do more of the composing stuff and like, you know, whatever. Like I'm not that keen. And so I kind of stopped seeing them, and I think I got to the end of the year, and that's when I stopped seeing them. And then over the Christmas break, I just wrote this track for fun, and I'm not sure why, but I was like, oh, maybe I'll send this to Adam. And I wasn't really that friendly with him. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just send this to him, see what he thinks. And it was just good timing, because when I sent it to him, they had just started working on a documentary called Life on the Reef. So it was about the Great Barrier Reef. And I had written this like kind of as I usually do, this emotive piano piece, but this is the first time I put beats on it. So I put beats on it. And so Adam wrote back and was like, oh, that's really cool. You know what's kind of cool is we're working on a documentary at the moment. Maybe we can put this track in and would you be interested in doing some work on it? And I was like, yeah. Even though in my head I was like, oh, I did just think I wasn't probably going to do any work with them. Like, because at the time I was like, I don't think this is for me. And now I'm like, yeah, of course. So I was super green. Like, I'm so lucky that they could be bothered to like take me on. Yeah. So because that's producing music really. You're still composing, but you've got to like produce it and that you have to do all the mixing and like stuff. And so for that you use Logic. I use Logic and they use Logic too. But previous to that, all my stuff at uni had been Sibelius. So I'm writing for real instruments. Whereas for TV you don't have the time or the budget. So you just do it on the computer. And so, man, I had no idea. Like I think what got me through was that I knew how to write music, which everyone says is the bit you can't teach. So you can't teach someone really how to write a tense track. Like you just kind of like need to know and develop that skill. So that bit was sort of, but like I knew nothing about production. Like I had no like libraries or like plugins. I had no proper sounds and they gave me some. And so I did this job with them and it was good. Like my stuff got used. But when I listen to that stuff now I'm like, man, that was so crap. I can't believe they put that on TV. Like, what was I thinking? But so that's how I started with them. And then it wasn't like I was hired or anything. So I kind of would occasionally check in and be like, hey, is there anything I can do? And I think it was hard because I was really green. So even though they wanted to use me, it was kind of like, well, do we have time to like train you up? So I kind of learned as I went and was lucky enough that like I learned, so there's a group of guys, and so like I'd learned things from Adam. Like a couple of years ago, Mitch like took me aside and like taught me a lot of stuff and like sat down with me and be like, look, this track's good, but you know, this is how we could make it better for this show. And so like, for example, I was always really good at the more arty, like ABC doco kind of vibes, whereas anything reality and like pop based, I just struggled with. Like I just couldn't get my head around it. And so, which is hard because that's where like a lot of the money is in like reality TV, where you get these big royalties. They kind of want that modern sound to it. Like ABC stuff, like I said, you don't get as much back from that. So for me, I was like, well, if I want to make a proper living from this, I really want to be doing those shows alongside obviously the other stuff that I find more, I guess, creatively engaging. So and it's funny, like I remember thinking at uni, like pop stuff's so shit. Like it's like, if you look at it from a pure theory-based thing, it's very simple.
Yeah, but that's the idea, right? It's 4 bars repeated.
It's simple. And but what I came to learn, and I think this might have been the conversation with Adam, was that he was like, yeah, you know, anyone can do it, but like if anyone could do it, everyone would be a pop star. What the hard part is to make something sound like convincing. And so, like, to write a pop song, it's easy. You pick some chords, you write some lyrics, you put some drums on it, you got a pop song. But to actually make a good, convincing track, there's so much more to it. And it is kind of just like writing any other piece of music. It's just as hard. There's other elements. Elements to it. So I think doing a lot of this reality stuff opened me up a bit more to... Like, I felt like I was always open-minded towards a more, like, conceptual, academic side of music.
Yeah.
But with pop stuff, I always brushed it up. But when I actually had to write it, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, this is actually so hard.
Yeah.
And so I think, a couple of things. Like, I was lucky that they were happy to kind of teach me. And so now I feel like I'm at a place where I can get a brief and I'm pretty comfortable tackling, like, if it's pop or if it's, like, jazz or whatever, I'm pretty comfortable. Like, I can always be better, but like I feel like I'm in a good place now. I've developed, really worked hard to develop that side of skills, which was something I think when I started uni I wouldn't have ever really thought of.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got into the TV sides, really through them, the DJs.
So then so subsequent jobs were through them as well, or did you then start to freelance, or how did that
bit of both? So I technically with them I'm still freelance. Yep. So because they kind of contract composers per job. But they were kind of like my main source for jobs, and I haven't done anything for TV outside of them. But then once I left uni, I kind of started picking up more indie projects, so like short films. My sister's a photographer, but she also has like it's called Buffet, and they do production, like content and stuff. So I do a lot of music for her content business, like little Instagram, Facebook videos.
Oh, so that's just, so she's got a social media content company?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And so I do stuff with her. Like we did stuff with Jason.
Yeah. So shout out to Jason, because we were talking about this
Jason.
before. Another common link for us. So Jason is a guy who does a lot of film stuff as well. And I actually did a podcast with him only, I think would be a couple episodes by the time this one comes up back. Yeah. Anyway. But anyway, so you can check that one out and find out a little bit more about Jason. But yeah, so you worked with him on that short film as well?
Yeah, he gave me, I think I did my outside of like uni stuff, like exercises.
How did you guys meet?
So we met through a friend of mine, a mutual friend called Dave, who did work with my sister actually. So Dave's a videographer, and he met Nikki. And then Nikki introduced me to Dave. And actually Dave, I used to do a couple of things with Dave and still occasionally do. Like he's done a couple of short documentaries, which I scored, which were really awesome. He's done a couple of he used to do things like short video, like promo videos for other companies. So I do that. And so then Dave introduced me to Jason. Okay. Kind of thing. So so it's all just kind of through just who networking, you know, networking. Yeah. And then so the DAs I mainly do TV, and then outside of that I'll do short film, like anything. Like I've done podcastings, short films, like travel videos. It's really just I did actually, one of my friends who I train with, he's a magician, so I wrote music for his show, which was really cool because I was like, oh, I've never done that before. I've done stuff with
Neo, isn't it?
Neo, yeah.
Because Jason did some filming for Neo. When I think Neo did something for one of the car companies, and then cool. Jason was telling me about it.
I had no idea about that. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So there you go. Another mutual friend. Yeah. I feel like everyone's always related through martial arts somehow. But so just I'm pretty open to whatever. Like, as in if it's a podcast, a film, an ad, I don't really mind. I think I'm pretty open to anything.
Give it a crack.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't just say, I only just do TV or just film. But generally I think people tend to kind of, because when I used to approach a lot of studios and kind of just get a feel for what's out there, and a question I'd always get asked when I'd like kind of meet up with these people would be like, well, do you do film or do you do ads? And I've never done a proper TV ad, but I've done like short ads. But then I didn't really realize it was like a thing. Like people either kind of do like TV, like long form, or they do short ads and stuff. But I probably now am more leaning towards long form. Like TV and film and stuff, just because it's just what I've just been doing.
Yeah, you're more used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Well, let's now talk a bit more about martial arts, because Dexter wanted me to bring up cyborg face.
Oh yeah, that's actually not from martial arts. Funnily enough, no. So to explain cyborg face, which I'm kind of like proud about, weirdly enough, I have plates in my what do you call this party? Orbital. Yes. So this was 2 years ago. I've got horses, and I was horse riding, and I wasn't even on the horse. So I took my horse out for a ride around the farm, and I was walking her. And I have these, like, they're riding boots, but they have laces. And I bent down to tie my laces. And when I bent down to do that, at the same time, my horse spooked. So she just got...
Kicked?
Well, not kicked. Spooked is more like they get a fright. And horses are super, like, flighty because they're prey animals. So she just kind of freaked out, and her front hoof just knocked the side of my face. And... And I don't even really remember, but so she just knocked it, and I fell over. I had my helmet on, and she ran off. She galloped off because she had a couple of incidents together, Gemma and I. And so I remember it hurt, but I remember I didn't get a concussion or anything, because I remember being on the floor, and I was about probably 500 meters from the house, but everyone was. Yeah. This was the Easter long weekend, and so I remember thinking, fuck, like, I've got to get up. Find my glasses. I found my glasses, got up, and I was like, okay, I've got to catch the horse. And so, and I'm in like so much pain because my eyes just like, I can't remember if I could see out of it or not, but I just remember like it hurt. Yeah. And so I catch Gemma, and then we start walking to the house. And as soon as I see the house, I just start yelling because I'm like, well, something's up. So I'm just yelling for my mom. Yeah. as usual in my family, this seems to happen. They like didn't hear me, or they thought I was like fucking around, so they took forever to come see what was wrong. I think my brother, because my whole family was there except my younger brother. My brother thought something had happened to my arm because I was like holding my face and the horse, and so my arm was like across my body. And then obviously when I removed my hand, they were like shit because it just swelled up. And so
no blood though.
No blood.
So it didn't actually break the skin. It was
tiny graze, like a bit of a graze, but nothing like I wasn't bleeding. And so they called the ambulance. I remember we got in the car. It was me, my mum, my dad, and typical my parents were trying to argue whether to drive me to the little ambulance station, which was about half an hour away, or to call the ambulance. And I remember they were like, we're in the car having this argument. I'm in so much pain. I'm like, I just want some morphine. Yeah. I'm like, stop arguing. Like, we just need to go. So they start driving to the ambulance station, and luckily the ambulance actually met us because some lady had like driven her golf buggy into a tree and had called the ambulance before we did. So they were on their way to pick up someone.
Wait, so did you just steal somebody's ambulance?
I can't even remember. No, because I think, they picked me up. I remember they picked me up. I think this is what happened. And I was so glad because I was like, morphine, like, thank God, because it hurt. And so they picked me up. We drove, then went to this lady's farm. Obviously, I didn't get out, but I think she was fine. I think she just like cut herself. It's like, how did you crash a golf buggy? Like, aren't they super slow? Anyway, whatever. And then, so they do their thing while I'm in the ambulance. And then they took me to the hospital. So I think we didn't take her ambulance, but we kind of like hijacked it. And they were like, you're fine. Let's take this chick to the hospital. So, so then obviously like to get the plates in, you've kind of got a time window between when the bones start to set and when you can like move them. So they have to wait till swelling goes down. And then once swelling goes down, you have like a 10-day period or something. So I had the operation and they put plates all in, and it had fractured in like 3 different places, but I was like typical. They're like, oh man, you're so lucky. And I'm like, well, if I was really that lucky, I wouldn't have gotten kicked by a horse. But everyone's always like, oh, you're so like, happened with when I dislocated my elbow. They're like, you're really lucky. I'm like, I'm not lucky. Have you seen my arm? But I didn't have any I didn't have any concussions. My eyesight wasn't affected at all, and like the only thing obviously was I had like 3 fractures in my face, but other than that, they're like, you're really lucky. So they put plates in. Apparently the surgery for that's crazy. Like, so they were like, look, you've got a really bony face. So obviously if we don't fix this, it's going to be noticeable. And then they're like, you have something like, because you've got Asian skin or whatever, like if we cut on your face, you're going to see scars. So what they do is they go under the eyelid and through the mouth to put the plates in. And I remember the day I was getting my operation, so I'm sitting on the bed just before the anaesthetist comes and like does all that stuff. Yep. And the surgeon comes in, he's like, look, so change of plan, we're going to try something else, but it's going to be fine, like, you're going to be great, but yeah, just not what we planned, but it's going to be fine. So I don't even know what he was trying to say, but I think he was saying, like, he was going to do something different to what we talked about, which I probably didn't really understand because, like, I'm not in a medical field. So whatever he says, I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
like, sure, whatever. But I was like, okay. And then I remember, like, the doctor to do the anesthetic was, like, yelling at the nurse because she did something wrong. And it was just, like, super stressful. Oh, wow. I'm like, oh, God, I do not need this stress. Like, you're about to operate on my face. Like, shit. And then... so I do the surgery, it's all fine, and then the doctor comes out. He was like this really young Korean guy. He was pretty funny, like just bit eccentric, but he was like, oh man, that was like one of the hardest surgeries I've done, but I think it's good. And I was like, shit, like he's talking about my face. Yeah. Like, if he fucks us up, like I'm fine. Anyway, so they go, I was like, please don't do it on my face. But they go like in your bottom eyelid and like up through your mouth, on the top of your mouth. So it's pretty crazy. Like, so,
and the plate's still in there?
Yeah, they were like, look, you can take it out if you want. And I was like, well, I do martial arts, so I'm probably going to leave it in. Definitely leave it in.
so I need to get you a left way fight.
So use that part of my face. So it's funny. They like everyone. So I had a huge black eye for ages. And every time I went out with Ryan, my boyfriend, people would kind of like look at him and look at my face.
Is he a beater?
Yeah, but like I feel like they looked at him more like, nah, that guy couldn't do that. Like, and then when it's so funny. Like people at the gym be like, oh, what happened? Like it's martial arts, right? And I was like, no, it was my horse. It's funny, like. I have had a lot of accidents from horses. Like, so this is maybe like my first proper carded Muay Thai fight. And so the doctor comes around. It was me and four of us fighting. So me and 3 other teammates. And the doctor comes around and they do like a check before you go up to fight. And so he sits us all down. He's like, all right, just got to ask you guys a couple of questions. And he was like, all right, first one. Has anyone here broken any bones? And my teammate's like, nope. And I'm like, oh, yeah, like I fell off my horse. I fractured my wrist. And he was like, okay. And then he does add more, like, are you pregnant or whatever? Like, was standard medical question. And then the next one was like, have any of you guys had a concussion? And again, everyone's like, no, we're good. Or like concussion in the last like year or so. Because obviously being fighters, they've definitely had a concussion. And everyone's like, no. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I fell off my horse like a couple months ago and had a concussion. And he's like, okay. And then the final question is, does anyone have any metal plates? And I'm pretty sure he's expecting everyone to be like, no. And then I'm like, yeah, from a horse. And the guy's like, maybe you should not horse ride anymore. Like stop doing dangerous things right before I go to fight. So yeah, the only bad accident I've had from martial arts was last year was when I dislocated my elbow. I've dislocated my thumb actually in a jiu-jitsu comp. Yeah. And that was annoying. Someone's gi or? No, that was no gi. And it was like the blue belt, like my final fight, and I was winning. I was like doing the best job. I was like up on points. I had mount. Yeah. And yeah, so I had mount. I don't know why, but the girl tried to bridge me off, and she didn't bridge me off, but my hand was upright for some reason. So when she came back down, she landed straight on my thumb. And I remember I was like, ow, and I pulled my thumb out, and I'm still in mount, so I'm sitting on her. My thumb is like fucked, and I just start yelling. I'm like, ah, and the girl is like still under me in mount, like, ah, like we're both just yelling, and my coach and the ref's like, what the fuck's going on?
What are they yelling about?
We're just yelling, and then finally like the ref or the coach like pulls me off this girl who's like freaking out because like my thumb's like in her face. Yeah. Anyway, she ended up winning the fight, which I was a bit salty about because I remember her posting on her Instagram like, oh, I won the blue belt championship, and I was like, bitch, you only won because I dislocated my own thumb. Like I was winning that on points. Like I was definitely gonna win that fight.
Jam that dislocated thumb in her face and try and make a tap.
That's my gold medal. Anyway, so they're probably the 2 that I've had. I've had like a couple niggling things. Like I think I've done a minor tear in a knee in like MMA once. And then like, like niggle, like, just niggling
always.
things.
You never go into any, if you're prepared, right, you technically probably don't go into any sort of comp or fight without having some kind of, kind of minor or major injury.
Kind of thing going on. Yeah.
So, let's talk about your first Muay Thai fight, right? Yeah. What made you decide to go and do that?
So every comp I had was to lead towards an MMA fight, which I haven't done. So did you do the jiu-jitsu comps first, or did you? Yeah. So I had been doing jiu-jitsu comps like since white belt. Yep. So I think I had my first comp like 6 months in. So I'd probably done about like 8 or 9 jiu-jitsu comps before doing this Muay Thai fight. It was like Sydney to Siam, whatever it's called. Yep. But before that fight, I'd done 2 development days. So they're like little sparring comps.
Smokers.
Yeah. They're just like, you just bang and there's no technique and you just throw punches. Yeah. And they're like kind of fun because it's padded, so you don't really get hurt. Yeah. They're actually pretty fun. But so it was really just a prep for an MMA fight. And so, yeah, I didn't win. I was close. Actually, I don't even know. I was close. Like I punched her a lot, but she kicked me a lot, and kick score better in Muay Thai. So it was, I'm pretty sure she had some really sweet head kicks. And I remember every time she landed one, I was like, fuck, like this is going to look so bad. Yeah. Like her fucking team's taking all these photos. Like it's just pictures of me getting head kicked the whole time. Pretty much. Like she posted something on her Instagram. I was like, fuck.
So you totally weren't in the...
well, yes and no.
Were you in the fight, or were you just you were too busy thinking about, fuck, I just got head kicked?
I don't know if you ever had this when you compete, but sometimes you just have like the most random thoughts. Yeah. And I find this when I used to perform like at school and stuff on piano, like I just have the most random thoughts. Like one time in a jits comp, this would have been like my last white belt comp, and I remember I had this chick, I think this was her first comp, and she was just one of those people who just grabbed and ran around, but like didn't know what she was doing. Yeah. And I remember she was holding my gi and she was just like shaking it, and I was just like, why the fuck am I doing this? And then I think I like took her down and got mounted and armbarred her in like, I don't know, like 2 minutes or whatever, but just like random thoughts that you have. And so like I was in the fight, but I just remember thinking, fuck, like these photos are going to look so good for her and like so shit for me, like goddamn. But it's weird fighting. Like I don't know if you find this, but like you feel so nervous up until you touch gloves, you slap hands, and as soon as you slap hands, it's like
goes quiet.
You just do it. And I like Dylan, my coach, like I could always hear him super clearly, and same with Liam whenever I did jiu-jitsu. So most of the time I'm thinking about what they're saying. I'm also, the other common thought I have is like, how much longer is this round? Like I'm so fucking tired.
Yeah, I think everybody goes.
That's like standard, just we almost done. There's been one of my Muay Thai fights. I remember thinking like, I've already won the other 2 rounds. Like I'll just cruise through this last round. And my coach is like, what are you doing? Like fight back. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm already winning. Like, come on. So bad. That's like the worst fight mentality to have. But I was really tired.
I'll tell you a funny one because Dex gave me shit about this. So
really?
it was one of the advanced no-gi comps we did for Grappling Industries. And Dex was in it. I think Dex did that comp with me as well. Yeah. And I had this for the longest time. I had this stupid mental thing where I would probably, like in my first match in any comp, I probably like take it too easy.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so, so I can't remember the guy's name, but it was a guy from, I think he was a purple belt from Gracie Barra. And anyway, so we go like, so when I was talking with Dex about, what my game plan was, I was just going to basically, I was thinking, well, I'll play legs, right? Like that's my thing, right? I'll do that.
For shame. I'm a wrestler, I hate legs.
And anyway, so in the first match, like basically, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking, but anyway, I started way too slow, right? And so anyway, so the other guy sits down, plays guard, gets shin to shin. I get outside heel hooked in like, I don't know, a minute or something like that.
Dumb.
Yeah, and then I was like, fuck. I was like so salty, right?
Yeah.
And so then after that, then I got my next 3 or 4 matches were all by sub. Like I heel hooked everyone in return, and then I had to face off against the same guy again in the shootout. And so then I was like, because I was so salty the first time. Then I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm gonna pull guard before he pulls guard, and then we'll see who's got the better leg game. Anyway, so then so because I'd been like I just managed to heel hook the last 3 or 4 guys, and they all would have seen it. I managed to get into saddle. So I don't know what happened in the scramble, but anyway, I managed to get to saddle, and then I was about to crank on the inside heel hook. He tapped straight away.
Oh, really?
Right? And so, because obviously he knew he was done. And then, so I think in that comp, I got a silver medal.
Did he get the gold?
No, he didn't get the gold.
Oh, okay.
Another guy got the gold.
Right.
So I got the silver medal in that one. And then, like, I don't know, a couple of days later, there's the film clip of him getting me in the first match.
Oh, no.
He posted it, and that Leg Locker Instagram account picked it up. Yeah. And I was like, fuck!
This is bullshit.
This is bullshit.
That's so annoying.
That was one match.
Yeah. And you're like, I beat that guy.
And I got my revenge.
That's so funny.
And so Dex was just like, Dex and I he was like making fun of me and giving me so much shit about it. I'm like, but we got the video. And I was like, Dex, can you go and send send the other video to Leg Locker? And I think Dex sent it, but never got picked up. And it was like, damn it, I just look like I got schooled.
Don't you reckon social media makes fighting like, I don't know, sometimes I always find like people do it for social media. It just adds another level of like thing where like that, where you're like, fuck, like I actually beat that guy. Like this is bullshit. Like, I don't know.
It's look, at the end of the day, it's I always look at it as, and in any comp, in any sort of loss, I always go, well, look, it is what it is. Like if I was really that much better, I shouldn't have been stupid in the first place, right? And got caught by the first sub, right? Like, so he tapped me, I tapped him back. Like, fair's fair. But I think the shitty part is just because like you didn't send. It's only just the one sided part of it, right? And if you're not the kind of guy, because I don't post any of my sort of things out there, I don't spruik any of it really. Like, this is probably the first time I've talked about it, publicly, right? So
you're letting it all out.
Yeah, well, it's been pent up for
It's been pent up for a while now.
But yeah, normally I don't really like sort of, I don't talk about that sort of stuff, right? So because I think this goes back to like when all the YouTube started becoming a thing, right? And I think most people will go through this where when you might be watching stuff online or whatever, and a lot of people have this urge to comment, right? Yeah. And like whether it's actually constructive or it's half the time it's just people trolling, right?
Yeah.
And I can't remember where I picked this up from, but I'm sure I picked it up from somewhere that like it was just it's one of those like blanket sort of statements where there's two types of people. There's the people that create the content and there's the people that comment on it.
Yeah.
Right? And it sounds like a really, I guess, snobbish way to view it, right?
No,
but I just viewed it as, okay, well, I don't want to be that guy that just comments on things. I need to do things.
Yeah.
Right? So so a lot of the times, like, and I guess, talking about that, like, I don't really promote my stuff very well. So like even the podcast, I don't really promote it very well. I just sort of put it up there. Whatever happens, happens. The short films that I've done with Jason, like I've just, they're up there.
Yeah.
But I don't really
You're not telling the world.
promote them, And then I got another mate who, I've done some rap songs with him.
Oh, what? That's so cool.
I won't play them here. I'll play them for you
Send
after.
them to me.
Yeah.
And then,
but anyway, so like, we've done some rap songs and like, and I don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But they're out there.
Yeah.
Right? And I sort of, the thing is like, because some of the things that he does is like really like, hardcore rap, right? And I was like, it's fun, right? But because of all the other stuff I do, I don't want that to be a reflection of like, people then go and take that and they take that snippet and go, oh, you're a misogynist or you're this or you're that or whatever because you were featured on somebody's track, right? when it could have just been a whole bunch of fun, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that a part of the reason why I ended up with the podcast format was because like it's one of those places where I can just be authentically me.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about how it's viewed or whatever because at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you just don't listen. Like it's fairly straightforward.
Harmless.
Like it's harmless, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, a matter of sharing those different perspectives. But
it's not you're not pushing an agenda.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just know that I'm like, I don't think I'm that kind of guy where and I was talking about this with one of my other friends, Monica, who she has like she also has like a side hustle where she does like lashes and things like that, right? And she was like, well, you're producing the content, you might as well push it, right? Like and like
and share it
and try and do that, like put all your hashtags and all that sort of stuff. And then I'll try it. And I'll do it like once, and then I'll be like, "This is way too much fucking effort."
It's
like
work, right? It's so hard.
Like, and respect to those guys who can build that sort of following. Like that is work in itself.
It's a lot of
right?
work.
And I was just like, no, I have no time for this shit. Like, I cannot be effed.
No, it's dead. Like I find a bit like that with like. So I released some stuff. I just mentioned it under Noki, and it was just kind of like it's become a bit more serious now. But when I released it, it was more just like something out there. I put it under a different name because I just was like, oh, I don't know, people will like it or whatever. But now I'm trying to push it more because it's interesting. Like when I show someone that verse, like my show reel, people like to know more about the Noki stuff. But just on what you're saying, like to get it out there, to release stuff and then put it in front of people, it's like, it's a lot of work. Like heaps. And like getting to know, you get into the stuff where it's like, when's the best time to post? Like, and what's the best hashtag? And it's just like, it is literally like another job in itself to do that kind of stuff. Sure.
So, okay, just on the Noki thing. So, how did that name come about and what?
So Noki,
is there a story there?
Yeah, a little bit. Noki is the name. So, my dog's called Mononoke. But obviously, I'm not going to say Mononoke every time.
Yep.
So, we've been calling her Noki. And so, the name kind of came about. So, I mentioned him before. So, Mitch is a guy I work with. And I think this was like mid last year where there wasn't too much work going on. He kind of mentioned, he was like, I've been releasing some music under this name. Because I think I kind of mentioned like, I had some pieces I wasn't doing anything with. And he just by coincidence was doing stuff. His was more like chill beats kind of thing. And another guy we work with was also doing it. He was doing it under his actual name though. And so he was like, just like, it's so easy to put stuff on Spotify. Just like put some stuff out there. Like just do it. And I was like, okay. And so I really like an artist called Taku.
Mm-hmm.
He's an Aussie. I think he's in Perth, but he's half. I think he's half Asian. I just can't remember what his actual background is. Anyway, so I really like his stuff, and I like the name Taku, and I was like, okay, so what would I do? And I wanted something that was pretty neutral. It didn't point to anything. It didn't point to a gender. Funny, most people assumed I was a dude.
Okay.
And so I picked Noki, and I didn't tell anyone about it, actually. I didn't even tell my family or my boyfriend or whatever. And I just, when I put stuff out and then made the effort to share with people, people really liked it. Like, I got a lot of feedback just from randoms being like, wow, like, I really enjoy this piece of music. And then I kind of wrote more and then started showing more people. Like, people would be like, oh, do you write music? Like, would you be interested in doing this job? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, like, here's some stuff that I've done. And on the side, I also do this for fun. And it was like any time I showed someone that stuff that I did for fun, they'd be like, oh, that's really cool. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
And I think for people who are like producers and directors, it just kind of showed, I guess, like I think people like to see that you're a creative. Yeah. Like, the music thing is just, you're just creative in music. But I think people, like, people like to think like this, like that people, you just like building things. Like, I guess they kind of viewed it as like, oh, well, she writes music for film, but like, she obviously loves just creating music. And that's what this Noki thing was. And I think, and it just kind of built up, because then I kind of was like, well, you know, I looked up to a lot of artists. Like, there's a guy called Oliver Arnolds, and he writes similar kind of stuff, but he performs it. So there's like Oliver Arnolds. There's obviously Joe Hisashi performs his own music. There's a guy called Max Richter who performs his own stuff. And so for me, it kind of like the Noki stuff felt like I'd finally found the kind of music I want to write, because it wasn't pure classical and it wasn't pure commercial. It was kind of like a mixture of the two. So it was a mixture of the skills I learned at uni and the skills that I've learned writing commercial music. Yep. And I guess for me, even during uni, for me, music was always an emotional thing. So if there wasn't an emotional response to it, either by myself or by the audience, then I was like, well, to me, I was kind of like, what's the point? Like, melody to me is really important. So in uni, you obviously there's a lot of like academic and conceptual stuff that you have to learn. And, you know, if you go into that kind of world, you kind of, there's this idea that you're continuing the tradition and you're building and innovating. And I think I always took it, and maybe this is wrong of me, but I always took it as innovating having to be super out there and different concepts and like new ideas, whereas I was quite happy to like, I guess, play with pre-existing concepts and ideas, like tonal music, for example. Like, I never was into atonal music. And so I never really viewed my stuff as like innovating the classical music tradition. And so that's why I think like I kind of didn't feel like I fit into uni. So then when I started writing this Noki stuff, to when I wrote it, and like when you listen to it, there's a lot of piano, a lot of strings. It's very emotional, but there's also a lot of nature sounds in there. Like, I like chucking in sounds of the ocean, or like I record my farm and chuck sounds of that in. So it felt like more of a true representation of myself. And it just so happened that people liked listening to it. So so earlier this year I did a little concert where I played live at my friend's Duncan's church. And so we hired like a string quartet, and me and another friend, Rory, we just put on a concert he started releasing his own stuff, similar style, but not the same. So strings and piano and beats, but just his I guess, style
version
of
it. Yep.
And so it really just is just a little side project that I'm just slowly building. And it's good because it's like, if it goes nowhere, it's just something I've built and it's there. It's kind of like this,
but
right?
It doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and I think, you know, a lot of people get caught up in this whole, you know, trying to be original type of thing.
Yeah.
When at the end of the day, we all stand, you know, as per that, Darwin that said the quote, you know, or whichever scientist said the quote, that we all stand on shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've all got these influences, whether it's in music, whether it's in martial arts, whether it's in education. Like, I know that I'm not the martial artist without my Kung Fu master, you know, Master James, and, you know, I'm not the same, you know, I'm not the same kind of martial artist that he is either. Like, we're different, right? Yeah. But doesn't mean that I don't respect and appreciate the learning that I got there. Yeah. You know, likewise from your music perspective, like, doesn't mean that you don't appreciate the classical and and that side of it, right? Yeah. But you have to find your own sound, right? And I think when you find that own voice, it's almost gives you a sense of freedom.
Oh, for sure. I was just actually thinking that. Like, it's so nice I can sit down and write this stuff, and it's like I don't feel any pressure to be, like, groundbreaking or, like, it's just literally whatever I feel like writing at that time, whatever I feel like adding to it, and, you know, like, it just is what it is kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't... Like, and that was the thing with uni. It always felt like the pressure to do something that was, like, good music but also had this great concept and had all this stuff to it. And then you kind of end up feeling a bit like a fraud because you're like, well, it's not doing any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah, it's hugely, like, freeing. And I think especially because for my job, I'm always writing to a brief.
Yep.
And I'm writing for someone. So with this, it's just like, well, like, I don't care if it's shit. Like, it's my music. Like, it is what I want it to be. So it doesn't even matter. So, yeah, it's definitely... I'm not sure where it'll go. It's building a little bit of momentum, but it's just the kind of thing where it's like, see what happens. Like, it's just always going to be there. So,
yeah. No. So, okay, so I guess on that, you know, if people want to find you, how do they find you?
So they can find me. I've got a website, which is my name, CassieTo.com. But if you want to hear my stuff on Spotify, it's under... Well, you can actually type my name in because I've released some other stuff under my actual name. So Cassie To. Or if you want to find No Kids, NO-KE on Spotify. And so there's like, I think 6 tracks on there. And then we're releasing 2 new ones on Friday next week. So 8th of May.
Oh, wow. Good time to do this podcast.
So you guys can listen to all my stuff. But
do you have anything on YouTube or...
Yeah, so all my stuff under Noki is on YouTube and SoundCloud.
Yep.
Not the one I'm releasing this Friday is on Apple Music, but the other stuff isn't. I gotta fix that. But definitely Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud. It's just NO-KE.
So okay, just talking about that because I think this might be interesting for some people that might be interested in putting creative stuff out there. When it comes to releasing your content, do you have to release your stuff individually to all those platforms? So is SoundCloud one platform, Spotify is one platform, or is there
depends.
Oh, okay.
So in terms of music, when you want to put something, SoundCloud is its own thing because it's a website and you just upload like you would to YouTube. You upload to SoundCloud. So SoundCloud, YouTube, Vimeo, unless you have someone managing you, you just go in and do it for those websites individually. For things like Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music, Deezer, what happens is when you want to release something, you find a distributor. And there's a thing like I used DistroKid, and it's just this thing where you upload your track to DistroKid. You obviously pay, and they then distribute your music to all the streaming services.
Okay.
So really that means anyone can upload things. So, but for example, with the 2 pieces I'm releasing next week, I'm doing that through a little like kind of indie label. So they're doing all that for me. And I don't know if they might have their own system of distributing it everywhere. But it's crazy how easy it is. Like I always thought Spotify, like you have to be a proper artist to release that. But really like you can just release whatever you want.
Yeah, you just got to take the time.
Matter. Yeah.
Yeah. So from the podcast side of things, right? Like so I was thinking, when I started this whole thing, I didn't really know how to even get the podcast up there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's probably ways that you probably don't need to spend any money. But then I looked at who were the podcasts that I listened to and who was their provider. So then I jumped onto a provider called Libsyn or Liberated Syndication. And so I pay a monthly fee and it gives me like an upload limit or whatever based on what membership you pay. And then they'll push it to all the respective. So Spotify, Apple Music. I finally fixed my YouTube thing, so but there's no like the content's there now, so if people want to find it there, they can find it there. But it was like broken for a while, and I was like, I just can't be fucked. Like, and then who was it? I think it must have been Jason actually. I was talking with Jason about it because I think last week, I hadn't organised anybody to do a podcast with. So I was like, I'll make this my task for this week then.
Right.
And so then I was like, okay, tried to work through all the different steps to try and fix it. And then it finally fixed. And then so all my episodes are in a random order. I do apologise for that because they just went up in one hit. Right?
You're like, whatever.
Yeah. And it was just like, send it.
Done.
So, tick the box and move on with life. So yeah, I'm sure, cool. If people want to comment and things like that, I probably won't read it. So, but feel free to go for your life.
This podcast sucks. You're like, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's easy. Like, It's actually surprising how easy it is. It's like, if you can be bothered to Google it, you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
literally, right? Like it's a resource, right? And and to be fair, like I think, that's one of the great things about like YouTube and Google and those sorts of things is that there's video tutorials for everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Pretty much. You can be an expert in anything.
Yeah.
If you just watch YouTube.
Alrighty. We've done almost 2 hours.
Wow. Yeah. That went quick.
Yeah, it went really quick.
Fun. All right. This is fun.
Yeah.
I like talking about myself.
All right. Well, I'm going to cut us off here because I'm going to play for Cassie some of these rap tracks so that she can have a bit of a listen.
I want to hear these.
Won't be on the podcast. See you all. Bye.
Bye.